Hello again, Steve here, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Catholic Church and the Mafia. Now, if you like what I'm doing, please visit me at innergenie.com, and you'll find my link for my books and my blogs and my old blogs and my old videos and what have you. So, anyways, I wanted to talk a little bit about this because of the importance for ourselves to set ourselves apart from the mob. The mob being the group or the central idea of community or whatever. Talked about this before about how, you know, if we focus on a wall, if we have a brick wall, right? If we focus on the wall as something in and of itself, then we can get ourselves in trouble, because if we haven't focused on the integrity of the bricks that we're building the wall with, then that wall could be eroded brick by brick, and then it would collapse. And this, I think, is the fundamental reason, part of the fundamental reason why whenever we find central control ideas, we find corruption, other forms of corruption come in. Like the example of the wall, overlooked the quality of the bricks. So a secondary effect is that the bricks get eroded and the wall collapses. Well, I use the two groups, the Catholic Church and the Mafia, as just an example, right? Because there's lots of other forms of corruption that sweep in. But the form of corruption I'm talking about, which would be the Catholic Church, an example of would be the Catholic Church, where it has this apostolic organization. I believe that's the term, where you have, you know, priests and cardinals or whatever, all the way up to the Pope. And the Pope is basically deified. He's a form of a deity in a way, and they quite literally believe that when he speaks under certain circumstances, I believe it's encyclically speaking, he's actually infallible. He's channeling God, essentially, and nobody else can do that, which automatically anybody of any rational sense knows that's just BS. But this video is not to harp on the Catholic Church. I mean, there's plenty of nonsense to go around in lots of different organizations, right? But what I've noticed is that, and I hope to get to the point of why I'm pointing this out later on, but anyways, what I've noticed is that wherever the Catholic Church has had a great amount of influence, as opposed to the Protestant, or more what many people would call the more Christian religions, the more apt you find Mafia. In the so-called country of Canada, for example, you will find the greatest amount of corruption in terms of Mafia members and organized crime and what have you in Quebec. What is Quebec as compared to the rest of the country? It has a history of being predominantly Catholic, and the rest of the country has had a history of being, for the most part, predominantly Protestant of some sort. Where I grew up, in a small rural community in Nova Scotia, at the end of our road there was a left turn and a right turn. When you turned left, it was Catholic. When you turned right, it was Protestant. And there was a marked difference. You turned left, you find all kinds of dysfunction, alcoholism, possibly petty criminality, but not really, because it was a rural area and everybody kind of knew each other, so you couldn't get away with much, but a lot of dysfunction. Poverty, suicide, this sort of thing. If you turned right, you ended up in the Protestant sector, and none of that. All well-kept homes, very functional businesses, more teetotalers than alcoholics, and so on. Not an example of Mafia, but once you get into the larger places like Montreal and Quebec City and Quebec in general and so on, you have that. You also have, if you look at, you know, Latin America. Throughout Latin America, there has been this history of the Catholic Church, and you have this history of organized crime, massive amounts of organized crime, and pretty much run the country unofficially. I know, I'll get it, that governments in general are organized crime, and I've said that before, but at least they're accepted as legitimate by most people. Typically, the mob is not. unless you're talking about El Chapo in certain areas when he was free. The people, some of the certain communities loved the guy. You go over to Europe and you find the further you go away from Catholicism. Okay, so you've got Italy, very corrupt with the mob. To some extent, I would guess, Spain perhaps, and France to a secondary degree, because France, of course, created a republic fairly early on and got rid of the power of the church. But still, that heritage lived on, and it's a very, very corrupt, socialistic place. Where you get to England and Germany, where you have predominantly, and Holland, where you have predominantly Protestantism, and the northern countries of Scandinavia, you have much more civility in terms of lack of mafiosos and lack of just blatant, consistent corruption. Although there's lots of that creeping in, of course, lately. It's just an observation. Now, what can we learn from this? Well, this isn't, once again, this isn't an attempt to have a tutorial on the failings of the Catholic Church and everything. There's lots of value that we can see in the message of Jesus, although the Catholic Church was obviously departed from what Jesus was talking about, I would say. If Jesus is a historical character, or even if it's just a story, it doesn't really matter. Catholic Church was formed, of course, by political decree, right? The Council of Nicaea, as far as I understand it, or some of those things around there. And it was all political. I mean, the pontiff, the Pope's official name, I believe, is pontiff, which basically means, that was the name of the Roman emperor. I mean, the Roman Empire still exists, and it's the Vatican, right? And it's just a smaller piece of territory, but still has a large influence. But I would say the reason that this is important for us is because, along the lines of what we were talking about yesterday, the importance of ego and the importance of having, the importance of focusing on ourselves as the foundation of strength in our lives. In the same way that if we were to look at the wall that we're going to build, and ahead of time we focused on the integrity of the bricks, of each brick, and made sure we had great integrity in those bricks, then when we go forward we can actually build a great wall, right? Whereas large organizations, what they do is they focus on the group first, right? Because the Catholic Church largely talks about this this body of Christ or whatever, that everybody is sort of part of this larger arm, if you will, of God. And while there's some value in that, especially in terms of, I would say, well, it's a different aspect of the religion, but in terms of the personal God, which has value, especially if it's embodied, and has a way of strengthening and creating greater integrity itself, it's important. But the idea that you have this citizenship, that you're automatically part of this, you're born into and stamped by a baptism, for example, and you become part of this larger whole that you must abide by, is fundamentally sinful, to use the religious wording. It's fundamentally corrupt, because there's no choice involved there, and then you're expected to follow a bunch of dictates. So you become part of a commune, which is always disastrous, and it always stifles individuality. When you stifle individuality, you don't get rid of it. It rears up, so it rears up illegally, and it rears up through a free market called criminality, right? And that's why you have the mob. You have these mobsters who create their own sort of control, because they're not allowed to exist normally inside the system. They're not allowed to do what they're doing internally within the system. So they because you have a hierarchy, or I'm having a hard time describing this, I guess, because you have a group that's focused in first. The only way you can have a group is to actually have powerful individuals. Because you can't speak to a group, you can't talk to a group, you can't negotiate with a group and so on. You have to have pontiffs and cardinals and leaders and emperors and all these sorts of things. So they're the ones who become the heads, if you will, of the group. And there's all this, unnumbered, great unwashed of the individuals down there. These corrupted individuals are put down anyways, put down by being forced to be part of the group. So the mafia then, they make deals with these heads because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I forget who it was who once said that. So it doesn't matter how holy somebody says they are, or how great, or how most worshipful, or whatever they want to be called, these leaders, so-called leaders are. These mafia men will then offer them bribes, and offer them under the table deals, and offer them hookers and blow and everything like that. And then they grow together. So what I would say is that because my analysis here, or my guess is here, that because the system of collective thinking by many people is fundamentally corrupt, it results in other corruptions, which is things like the mafia. So whenever you see large religious organizations, large political organizations, be they communism or different forms of socialism, they always come with them these corrupt operatives, because it becomes very, very profitable to get on the corruption gravy train, right? And so it's not surprising. So the lesson for us, I think, is to not buy into this collectivism, to realize that we can be part of a group, sure, but we have to voluntarily be part of a group in order for it to be legitimate, first of all. But fundamentally, we're individual. And we can't really, at least I don't see how we can, try to fix ourselves by trying to fix everybody else and force everybody else to do certain things. I think fundamentally, it's best for us to work on ourselves and to become better as best we can. And that then diffuses itself out into our families, into our friends, and into our community, and so on. And that way, we affect the whole. Just in the same way that if we focus on getting good quality bricks, and we build with those good quality bricks, we're going to have a quality wall. But if we just focus on the wall first, and just have this wishful thinking that somehow we can just think and create these ideas that we're going to have a great wall, our thinking is corrupt, and therefore we're going to have a corrupt wall. And that's what we have every time in history, that we focus on this big collective, be it religion or politics, or any kind of group that somehow speaks for us. We're in for trouble. So we're going to end up with corruption in our thoughts, which ends up in corruption in our worlds. So if we just think about that and focus on what's most important, building up ourselves, becoming physically strong, mentally strong, and emotionally strong, and that will have a great effect on the rest of our worlds. Steve here, great chatting. Talk again soon. And if you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. Bye for now.